The old wooden house on the corner of Elm Street had been standing for more than 60 years. Its paint was fading. The porch creaked when the wind blew, and ivy climbed up one side like an old friend refusing to let go. Inside that house lived Miss Thelma Robinson, a woman in her 70s with soft brown skin, silver hair tied neatly in a bun, and eyes that always seemed to carry both kindness and wisdom. Most people in town knew Miss Thelma as the lady who baked sweet potato pies for the church every Sunday. She had retired from teaching at the elementary school a long time ago, but folks still called her Miss Robinson out of respect. Her days were quiet now, mornings filled with gospel music playing low on her old radio, afternoons spent watering her roses or sewing quilts for the church fundraiser. Thelma had lost her husband Henry 20 years ago. He was a kind man who used to fix cars in their driveway and whistle while he worked. When he passed, the house had fallen silent. Her only son had moved to Chicago for work and rarely called except on holidays. The loneliness had settled into the house like dust, always there even when she tried to clean it away. Yet Thelma never complained. She believed in gratitude. Every night she said her prayers, thanking God for another day, for her health, and for the roof over her head. Her faith was what kept her steady through the years. One rainy Thursday evening, Thelma sat in her kitchen sipping a cup of tea. The rain came down hard, hitting the tin roof in quick rhythms. She could hear thunder rolling far away, and once in a while a flash of lightning lit up the dark yard. She liked the sound of rain. It made the world feel smaller, cozier. Just as she was about to turn off the kitchen light, she heard something, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. It was faint, like metal scraping gravel, followed by what sounded like a low engine struggling. She frowned and went to the window. Through the rain, she could barely make out a shape. A large motorcycle pulled up near her gate. Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't often anyone stopped by her house at night, especially not in weather like this. She hesitated for a moment, then reached for her flashlight and shawl before stepping out onto the porch. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the air smelled of wet earth. Under the dim light of the street lamp stood a man and a little girl. The man looked worn out, soaked from head to toe, leather jacket heavy with water, boots caked with mud. His beard was thick and dark, and tattoos peeked out from under his sleeves. Beside him, the small girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, clung to a backpack, her hair plastered to her face. "Evening, ma'am," the man said, his voice rough but polite. "I'm sorry to bother you, but my bike broke down just up the road. We've been trying to find a place to stay dry. My little one's freezing." Thelma's first instinct was caution. It wasn't every day a stranger, especially one who looked like he rode with a biker gang, showed up at her doorstep. But when she looked at the child, shivering and trying hard not to cry, her heart softened immediately. "Lord, you two look half drowned," she said gently. "Come on in before you catch your death," the man nodded gratefully. "Thank you, ma'am. I promise we won't cause any trouble." Inside, the warm air smelled faintly of cinnamon and soap. Thelma handed them both towels and told the girl to sit by the heater. The little one, still quiet, obeyed right away. "You can hang your jacket on that hook," Thelma said. "I'll get you both something hot to drink." The man nodded again, still looking uncomfortable, as if he wasn't used to kindness. His hands trembled slightly as he rubbed them dry. Thelma noticed the tattoos on his fingers, faded names and small symbols, but she didn't ask. When she brought them mugs of cocoa, the little girl smiled for the first time. "Thank you, ma'am," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's your name, baby?" Thelma asked. "Lily," she said. "That's a beautiful name," Thelma said warmly. "You like marshmallows?" Lily nodded, and Thelma dropped a few in her cup. The man introduced himself simply as Jack. He spoke in short sentences, his voice low, almost careful. He said they had been on the road most of the day, and that his motorcycle engine gave out just before the storm started. They'd tried to reach the next town, but the rain made it impossible. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said. "We just needed a dry spot till morning. I can fix the bike once it's light." "It's no trouble," Thelma said, though her heart was still racing a little. "You can stay in the spare room tonight. It's nothing fancy, but it's warm." He looked surprised. "That's real kind of you. We can sleep in the barn or porch if you'd rather." "The barn's colder than my fridge," she replied with a small smile. "You'll take the room, and that's that." He gave a small nod of gratitude, and for a moment their eyes met. There was a quiet understanding there. Two strangers, both tired from life in different ways, both holding more stories than they could tell in one night. Later, after they settled in, Thelma sat by her kitchen table again, looking at the two mugs they had left behind. One had a ring of cocoa at the bottom, the other a few half-melted marshmallows. She thought about how unexpected life could be, how even at her age something new could knock at her door. Before going to bed, she peeked into the spare room. Lily was already asleep, curled up under the quilt, while Jack sat in the chair by the window staring out into the rain. He looked thoughtful, almost sad. Thelma whispered softly, "Good night," then closed the door quietly. That night, sleep didn't come easily. She kept thinking about the man and the little girl. Something about them tugged at her heart. They looked lost, but not just on the road, lost in a deeper way. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. Birds chirped outside, and the rain had washed the world clean. Thelma cooked breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and grits, and the smell soon filled the house. Jack came into the kitchen, freshly washed, his hair still damp. He looked different in the morning light, less intimidating, more human. He thanked her quietly and helped set the table. Lily followed, smiling shyly, now wearing one of Thelma's old sweaters that fit her like a dress. They ate together, and conversation came slowly but naturally. Jack told her he'd been traveling from one state to another, looking for work and a fresh start. He didn't share too many details, but Thelma didn't press. She had learned long ago that sometimes people reveal their hearts in pieces, not all at once. After breakfast, Jack went outside to check his motorcycle. Thelma watched from the porch as he knelt beside it, wiping the mud off carefully, as if it was more than just a machine, maybe a part of his life he wasn't ready to give up. Lily helped Thelma water the plants and feed the cats. The little girl talked more now, asking questions about everything, the flowers, the pictures on the wall, even the old radio that played soft jazz. Her laughter filled the house in a way Thelma hadn't heard in years. By afternoon, the sun was high, and the engine finally roared to life again. Jack looked relieved. He thanked Thelma again, saying he didn't know what he would have done without her help. "You're welcome here any time," Thelma said. "You and that sweet girl of yours." He smiled faintly. "You're a good woman, Miss Robinson. Not many folks would have opened their door to us." Thelma shrugged lightly. "Well, the good book says to be kind to strangers. Never know when you might be entertaining angels." Something in her words made him pause. He nodded slowly, as if those words meant more to him than she realized. When they finally left, the sound of the motorcycle faded down the road, leaving behind only the hum of cicadas and the rustle of the trees. Thelma stood on her porch for a long time, watching the empty street. She couldn't explain it, but she felt something shift inside her. A quiet sense that this wasn't the last time she'd see them. The rain had brought them to her doorstep, but something else, something unseen, had made her open that door, and though she didn't know it yet, that small act of kindness was about to change her life in ways she could never imagine. That night, as the sun went down and the crickets began to sing, Thelma smiled to herself. Maybe, she thought, loneliness had a funny way of preparing you, of making room for someone new to walk in. And somewhere down the long, winding road, a man and his daughter rode into the sunset, both thinking about the old lady who had welcomed them without question, and how one simple act of kindness could still exist in a world that often forgot what kindness looked like. Thelma woke up the next morning thinking about the little girl's laugh and the way the man had said thank you before they left. It had been a long time since anyone had sat at her kitchen table besides her. For years her house had been filled with quiet, the kind of silence that came from missing the sound of another voice. Now it was as if that short visit had stirred something inside her that she didn't know she'd been missing. She went about her usual chores, feeding the cats, watering the plants, sweeping the porch, but her mind kept wandering back to the two strangers. She hoped they were safe. The storm had passed, but she knew the roads could still be muddy and slick. She told herself she'd probably never see them again, yet a small part of her wished she would. That afternoon, just as she was folding laundry, she heard the faint rumble of an engine outside. Her heart skipped. She set the basket down and went to the window. Sure enough, that same motorcycle was pulling into her driveway. When she opened the door, the man stood there looking sheepish. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said. "Sorry to bother you again. I think the bike's acting up again. Mind if I take a look in your driveway?" Thelma smiled, half amused. "Looks like that machine of yours just wanted another visit," she said. "Go on ahead. You know where the tools are." He grinned slightly. "You sure?" "I wouldn't say it if I wasn't," she replied. "And where's the little one?" He motioned toward the road. "She's sitting on the curb with her coloring book. I told her not to touch anything." Thelma stepped outside and waved toward the girl. "She can come inside if she wants," she called. "It's too hot to be sitting out there." The girl smiled and ran up the path, her small backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Hello, Miss Robinson," she said brightly. Thelma chuckled. "Well, look at you remembering my name. Come on in, sugar. I've got lemonade in the fridge." Soon the house was filled again with that same warmth it had missed. Lily sat at the kitchen table, coloring carefully while Thelma poured lemonade into glasses. Jack, though she didn't yet know much about him, worked quietly outside, the sound of clinking tools drifting through the open window. After a while, he came back in, wiping his hands on a rag. "I think it's fixed now," he said. "Should hold for a bit. Just needed some tightening." "Good," Thelma said. "Now sit down and drink something before you pass out from the heat." He hesitated, but then did as she said. For a few minutes, no one spoke. The air hummed softly with the sound of cicadas outside and the low hum of the refrigerator. "You from around here?" Thelma finally asked. Jack shook his head. "No, ma'am. We've been moving around a while, trying to find a place to land." "Just you and the little one?" "Yeah," he said softly. "Just us." He didn't offer more, and Thelma didn't push. But she noticed how he glanced at Lily from time to time, like a man watching the only good thing left in his life. Later, as the afternoon turned golden, the three of them sat on the porch. Thelma brought out some cornbread she'd baked the night before, and Lily nibbled it happily while talking about the butterflies she'd seen. Jack mostly listened, occasionally smiling at something his daughter said. Thelma told stories about her old students, how one of them once brought a frog to class, and how another accidentally glued his notebook shut. Lily laughed so hard she nearly dropped her plate. By the time the sun started setting, the air had cooled and Jack stood to leave. "We'll get out of your hair now," he said. "Thank you for the drink and the company." "You're welcome any time," Thelma said honestly. "And next time maybe bring that bike of yours after it's had a proper tune-up." He smiled faintly, nodding. "Yes, ma'am." She watched as they rode away, the motorcycle rumbling down the quiet road, the little girl's arms wrapped tightly around her father's waist. She didn't know why, but seeing them go made her feel a strange kind of emptiness, like the end of a good story you weren't ready to finish reading. Over the next week, life went back to normal. Or at least it tried to. Thelma went to church, did her shopping, and joined her knitting circle at the community hall. But even during the small talk and laughter, her mind would drift. She kept thinking about that man, the way he looked at his daughter, the quiet sadness in his eyes. She could tell he'd seen hard times. One Friday afternoon, while she was trimming her rose bushes, she heard that familiar sound again, the deep rumble of the motorcycle. This time she didn't even have to look. "Well," she muttered to herself with a smile, "looks like my guests are back." Sure enough, Jack parked the bike near her gate and took off his helmet. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said. "I hope you don't mind us stopping by again." Thelma wiped her hands on her apron. "Mind? I've got extra cornbread cooling on the counter. Come on in." Lily ran up to her and handed her a small flower she'd picked along the road. "For you," she said. Thelma's heart melted. "Ain't that the prettiest flower I've seen all week?" she said, tucking it behind her ear. That evening, as they sat down for supper, the conversation came easier. Jack talked a bit more about his travels, how he'd been working odd jobs here and there, trying to keep things steady for Lily. He said he used to work with engines and knew his way around motorcycles. "Sounds like you could open your own shop one day," Thelma said. He laughed softly. "Maybe. I just need a place that'd let me start fresh." "Well, this town's quiet but full of good folks," she said. "Might not be a bad place to stop running." He looked down at his plate for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe you're right." After dinner, Lily helped Thelma wash dishes while Jack stepped outside to make a call. The girl talked about her schoolwork, though it was clear she hadn't been in one place long enough to stay in a school for long. Do you miss your friends? Thelma asked gently. Lily shrugged. I don't really have any, she said. But Daddy says maybe soon we'll stay somewhere for good. Well, I hope you do, Thelma said softly. And when that day comes, you make sure to invite me to your first birthday party there. Lily giggled. You promise you'll come? Thelma smiled. You just try and stop me. When Jack came back in, he looked thoughtful. Miss Robinson, he said, I was wondering, would it be all right if we stayed for a few days? I can help around the house, fix whatever needs fixing. It'd just be till I get some money together. Thelma hesitated only a second. Her house was big, her days long, and for the first time in years it felt like life had a bit of color again. You can stay, she said simply, but only if you promise not to skip breakfast. A small smile broke across his face. Yes, ma'am. That night, Thelma made up the spare room again. She found one of Henry's old shirts for Jack to wear and gave Lily a set of soft pajamas she used to keep for her nieces. As she turned off the lights, she thought about how strange life was, how quickly strangers could begin to feel like something more. The next morning, the house was alive with new sounds. Lily humming as she fed the cats, Jack hammering away at the loose porch steps. Thelma stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, watching them with quiet joy. By the third day, the neighbors began to notice. Mrs. Carter from across the street stopped by with a basket of apples and a curious smile. Who's that man fixing your porch? She asked, lowering her voice. And who's the little girl? A friend, Thelma said plainly. They're staying a few days. Mrs. Carter raised an eyebrow. You sure that's wise? You don't know where they came from. Thelma's eyes softened, but her tone stayed calm. I know enough, she said. They needed a hand and I had one to give. When her neighbor left, Thelma sighed. She knew the gossip would start. Small towns never let a story sit still for long. But she didn't care. She'd made her choice. That evening, Jack brought her a small box. Inside were the repaired knobs from her old radio, shining like new. It was easy to fix, he said quietly. Figured you might like to hear it working again. Thelma blinked, touched. That old thing hasn't played in years. He plugged it in, turned the dial, and soon soft jazz filled the room. Lily twirled in a slow circle, giggling as the music played. Thelma felt tears well up. Not from sadness, but from the simple beauty of it all. That night, she sat on her porch with Jack after Lily went to bed. The crickets were singing and the air smelled of honeysuckle. You've got a good heart, Miss Robinson, Jack said quietly. Not everyone would have done what you did, she smiled. Sometimes kindness costs nothing, and sometimes it brings everything back to life. He nodded slowly as if the words reached something deep inside him. Neither of them said much after that. They just sat there, two souls from different worlds brought together by rain, chance, and a door that had opened when it didn't have to. The days turned into weeks and Thelma's house began to feel different, more alive somehow. It wasn't just the sound of footsteps or the smell of coffee brewing earlier than usual. It was laughter echoing in the kitchen, the sight of little shoes by the door, and the hum of quiet conversation at the table. Jack and Lily had slowly settled into a rhythm that fit easily with Thelma's world. Every morning, Jack would fix something around the house, a loose cabinet door, a leaky faucet, or the fence that had leaned for years. He worked with quiet focus, sometimes humming under his breath. Lily would follow Thelma through the garden, asking questions about every plant and helping feed the cats that always seemed to find their way to her yard. Thelma hadn't realized how much she'd missed the feeling of caring for others. She found herself waking up earlier, cooking bigger breakfasts, and smiling more often. Even her church friends noticed the change. You've got a glow about you lately, Mrs. Carter had said one Sunday after service. What's your secret? Thelma had only smiled. Maybe I just finally got some company worth keeping, she said. Still, not everyone in town shared her kindness. Some whispered when they saw Jack's motorcycle parked in her driveway. A few people asked if she knew what kind of man she was letting stay with her. Thelma didn't let their words bother her. She had lived long enough to know that people fear what they don't understand. One afternoon, as the sun poured through the kitchen window, Thelma sat with Lily at the table. The girl was coloring a picture of flowers while Thelma chopped vegetables for dinner. Miss Robinson, Lily said softly. Can I ask you something? Of course, baby. What's on your mind? Do you get lonely when we're not here? Thelma paused, knife midair, then smiled gently. I used to, but not anymore. Lily looked up, her big eyes curious. You mean because we're here? That's right, Thelma said. Sometimes God sends people into your life when you least expect it. You two showed up on a rainy night and now my days feel a little brighter. Lily grinned and kept coloring. Daddy says the same thing, she said. He says you're the nicest person we ever met. That made Thelma chuckle. Well, your daddy's learning good manners then. A few minutes later, Jack walked in from outside, wiping his hands with a rag. That porch is good as new, he said. You won't have to worry about anyone falling through anymore. Thank you. Jack, that porch was older than both of us put together. He laughed, a sound that came more easily these days. They sat down to eat and conversation flowed naturally. Jack started talking about his younger days, working in a garage, fixing cars, riding cross-country. He didn't brag. He just talked in that easy way of someone who'd lived a lot of life and carried both the good and the bad of it. At one point, he grew quiet. His eyes went distant for a moment, like he was remembering something heavy. You all right? Thelma asked gently. He nodded, forcing a small smile. Yeah, just thinking how different life looks now. I didn't used to believe in second chances. Well, she said, setting her fork down, you're sitting right in the middle of one. That night, after dinner, Lily helped Thelma wash dishes while Jack sat on the porch, staring at the sky. Thelma joined him after a while, carrying 2 cups of tea. You don't talk much about the past, she said quietly. He took the cup from her, nodded, and let out a long breath. Not much worth talking about, I guess. Sometimes, she said, talking helps, even if you don't think it will. He hesitated, then looked at her. You really want to know? She nodded once. He took another sip of tea and stared into the yard. I made a lot of bad choices when I was younger. Rode with the wrong people. Spent more time fighting and drinking than thinking. When Lily's mama got sick, I didn't handle it right. I was angry at the world, at myself. I lost track of what mattered. Thelma listened quietly, her hands folded on her lap. When she passed, he continued, voice low. It was just me and Lily. I promised her I'd do better. I've been trying to keep that promise ever since. He looked at Thelma as if expecting judgment, but all she gave him was a soft nod. We all carry things, Jack, she said. What matters is how you carry them now. That little girl out there, she's proof you're doing something right. He smiled faintly. You really believe people can change? I've seen it with my own eyes, she said. And I've lived long enough to know nobody's story is finished until the good Lord says so. From that evening on, something shifted between them. Jack started to open up more, sharing little pieces of his life, not the rough parts, but the small human ones. He told her about the time Lily took her first steps, about how she loved pancakes with chocolate chips, about how every night on the road they'd look for the brightest star and make the same wish, a home. One Saturday, Thelma decided to take them to the local farmer's market. It was a bright day, the air full of chatter and the smell of roasted corn. Lily held Thelma's hand while Jack walked beside them, looking slightly out of place but not uncomfortable. People glanced at them, curious, some even whispering. But Thelma didn't care. She walked tall, her chin up, proud of the company she kept. At one of the stands, an old man selling honey greeted her warmly. Morning, Miss Robinson. Haven't seen you out here in a while, Thelma smiled. I've been keeping busy. Looks like you've got some helpers today. She looked at Jack and Lily. That I do, she said. Good ones, too. Lily beamed at the compliment. Jack smiled quietly, grateful for the kindness. They spent the morning walking through the market, laughing and tasting samples. For the first time in a long time, Thelma felt part of something again. Not just part of the town, but part of a family. When they returned home, the house seemed warmer somehow, as if it recognized the sound of happiness. That evening, Jack helped her fix the old shed behind the house. The sun was low, painting everything in gold. You know, Thelma said, watching him hammer a loose board, you've done more work in 2 weeks than I've managed in 5 years. He laughed. Guess it's easier when you've got good company. She smiled. Careful, I might put you on payroll. He pretended to think. As long as it comes with cornbread, I'm in. That made her laugh out loud, a full, deep laugh she hadn't heard from herself in years. Later that night, after Lily went to bed, Thelma sat in her chair with her knitting while Jack listened to the radio he'd fixed. A slow old song played, the kind that carried memories in its tune. Jack looked around the room and said quietly, "It feels like home here." Thelma stopped knitting for a moment and looked at him. "That's because it is," she said softly. "Home isn't always a place you're born to. Sometimes it's the one you find when you stop running." Jack nodded, eyes shining a little. "I stopped running the day we knocked on your door." Thelma smiled but didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. As the night went on, the air outside filled with the soft sound of crickets and the smell of rain coming from far away. The house, once filled with silence, now held a different kind of quiet, the kind that comes when hearts begin to heal. Before going to bed, Thelma peeked into the spare room as she always did. Lily was fast asleep, clutching a stuffed bear Thelma had found in an old box. Jack was sitting by the window again, staring at the stars. She whispered, "Good night," and closed the door gently. In her own room, Thelma knelt beside her bed to pray, something she'd done every night since she was a little girl, but this time her prayer was different. "Lord," she whispered, "thank you for bringing them here. I don't know what your plan is, but I'm grateful for it. Please watch over them, and if there's more I can do, show me how." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, she felt a deep peace, the kind that only comes when you know you're doing something right. In the following days, Jack started helping out around town. He fixed a neighbor's car, repaired a fence for an old farmer, and even helped repaint the church steps. People began to see what Thelma had seen all along, a man trying hard to be better. Of course, not everyone changed their mind. Some still whispered, some still frowned, but Thelma knew that kindness had a way of outlasting judgment. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lily curled up beside Thelma and said, "Miss Robinson, can I ask you something?" "Sure, sweetheart. Do you think we'll stay here forever?" Thelma looked at her, then at Jack, who was listening quietly. "I think," she said slowly, "sometimes forever starts in small places. Maybe it starts right here with a porch and a sunset." Lily smiled sleepily and rested her head on Thelma's shoulder. Jack watched them, his face soft in the fading light, and in that quiet moment, Thelma realized that something inside her heart, something she thought had long gone cold, was alive again. She didn't know what the future would bring. She didn't know if they'd stay or move on. But she did know this: sometimes love doesn't knock politely. Sometimes it shows up on a rainy night, tired and lost, and teaches you that home isn't a house. It's the people you open your door to. The morning sun spilled softly through the kitchen window, lighting the table where Thelma sat with her cup of tea. The house was calm, filled with small familiar sounds: the clink of dishes, the purr of the cat, the steady creak of Jack working outside on the fence. Lily sat nearby, humming as she drew pictures with her crayons. Life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. The days moved slower, but they were full of laughter, work, small moments that made everything feel steady and safe. Thelma often thought about how quiet her life had been before Jack and Lily showed up. Now she couldn't imagine her home without them. They had brought something she didn't even realize she'd lost, a reason to wake up smiling. But peace has a way of testing itself. It started one Saturday afternoon when Thelma went into town for groceries. Jack stayed behind to paint the shed, and Lily stayed with him, playing with the kittens near the porch. The town was busier than usual that day, people chatting outside the diner, kids riding bikes down the dusty road. When Thelma stepped into the market, she could feel eyes following her. She heard the whispers again, low voices that thought she couldn't hear. "That biker still staying with her? I heard he's got a record." "She's too trusting, that old woman." Thelma didn't look up. She kept walking head high, but her hands trembled slightly on the shopping cart handle. At the counter, the young cashier smiled politely. "Need any help carrying this out, Miss Robinson?" "No, thank you," she said kindly. "I've carried heavier things than this in my time." When she returned home, she saw Jack sitting on the porch steps, wiping paint off his hands. He looked up, reading her face immediately. "Something wrong?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just small-town chatter," she said. "Nothing I can't handle." Jack nodded slowly but said nothing. The tension lingered between them for a while, the kind that doesn't need words to be felt. That evening, as the sun sank behind the trees, Jack sat quietly at the table, barely touching his food. Lily chattered about her day, how she'd seen a butterfly with blue wings and how she'd named one of the kittens Daisy, but her father's silence made her frown. "Daddy, you're not eating," she said softly. He looked at her and forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired." Thelma watched him closely. Something was weighing on him. She could see it in his eyes, the same look he'd had the night he told her about his past. Later that night, after Lily went to bed, Thelma found him sitting outside, staring at the dark sky. "You've got something on your mind," she said, sitting beside him. He nodded slowly. "I saw a man in town this morning. He used to ride with me years ago. He recognized me." Thelma's heart tightened. "Did he say anything?" "Not much," Jack said quietly. "Just called me by my old name and asked what I was doing here. I told him I wasn't that man anymore. But you know how rumors spread. If he talks, folks might start asking questions." Thelma stayed quiet for a moment, letting the night sounds fill the space. Then she said softly, "You can't control what people say, Jack, but you can control who you are now. And from where I'm sitting, that's a good man." He looked at her, his jaw tight, but her calm voice seemed to ease him. "You really believe that?" "I wouldn't have let you stay if I didn't." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The stars blinked overhead and a cool breeze moved through the trees. But deep down, Thelma knew the calm might not last forever. A few days later, a police car rolled slowly past her house. It didn't stop, but Thelma saw the way the officer inside looked at the property, curious, maybe even cautious. Jack saw it too. He said nothing, but later that day she found him fixing things that didn't really need fixing, like a man trying to work away his worries. That evening, Lily asked if they could all eat outside on the porch. The air was warm and the fireflies had just begun to glow. Thelma set the table with lemonade and cornbread, and soon the mood lightened again. Lily told funny stories about the cats, and Jack even laughed, though the sound carried a trace of weariness. After dinner, Lily fell asleep on Thelma's lap while they watched the stars. Thelma brushed a hand over her hair and said softly, "You've done right by her, Jack." He sighed. "I'm trying. I just don't want my past to catch up to her." Thelma looked at him with steady eyes. "Maybe your past isn't chasing you anymore. Maybe you've already outrun it, you just haven't noticed." Jack didn't answer. But for the first time that night, he looked a little less haunted. The next morning, Thelma woke early and found Jack already outside. He was sitting on the porch steps with a cup of coffee, staring out toward the road. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just thinking." "You think too much," she said gently. "You'll wear yourself out before the sun's up." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I keep wondering if we're meant to stay here. I don't want to bring trouble to your doorstep." Thelma poured herself a cup of coffee and sat beside him. "If you were going to bring trouble, it would have come by now. You've brought peace instead." Jack looked down, his fingers tracing the rim of his mug. "You've got more faith in me than I do." "That's all right," she said. "I've got enough for both of us." That day passed quietly. Lily spent the morning drawing while Jack helped Thelma clean out her shed. They found old boxes full of photographs and letters from years ago, memories of her husband and the life they'd built together. "This was Henry," she said, showing him a picture of a tall man with a bright smile. He was good with his hands too. "Always fixing something." Jack smiled softly. "You must miss him." "Every day," she said. "But I don't grieve him the same way anymore. I just thank God for the years we had." He nodded, carefully placing the photo back in the box. "You talk about him like he's still here." Thelma looked out at the garden. "Maybe he is in a way. In this house, in the things he built, in the peace that still lives here. Love doesn't disappear. It just changes shape." Her words hung in the air, gentle but full of truth. That evening, while they were cleaning up after supper, a knock came at the door. The sound was sharp, unexpected. Thelma glanced at Jack, who froze for half a second before moving toward the window. Outside stood a man, rough-looking, in a faded denim jacket, a motorcycle parked behind him. Jack's shoulders tensed, but Thelma laid a hand on his arm. "Let me." She stepped out onto the porch. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. The man squinted at her. "Looking for Jack Lawson. Heard he's been staying here." Thelma didn't flinch. "Depends who's asking." "An old friend," he said with a smirk. "Just wanted to say hello." Jack appeared in the doorway then, his face unreadable. "That's enough, Rick," he said quietly. "You said what you came to say," Rick shrugged. "Didn't mean nothing by it. Just surprised to see you playing family man." "Then be surprised somewhere else," Jack said, still calm but firm. Rick looked from Jack to Thelma, then back again. "Suit yourself," he muttered, walking back to his bike. "You can't hide from who you were forever, brother." When the engine roared to life and disappeared down the road, Thelma turned to Jack. His face was pale. "You all right?" she asked softly. He nodded, though his eyes looked far away. "I'm sorry you had to see that." "You've got nothing to apologize for," she said. "That man was trouble, and trouble doesn't get to decide who you are." Jack didn't answer right away. "He's not wrong, though," he murmured. "You can't always run from the past." Thelma looked at him firmly. "No, you can't, but you can walk away from it and walk toward something better." That night the house was quiet again. Lily slept peacefully, unaware of the visitor. Jack sat by the window in the spare room, deep in thought, while Thelma prayed in hers. "Lord," she whispered, "keep them safe. Let this house stay a place of peace." The next morning the world felt lighter, as if the storm had passed, not one of rain, but of worry. Jack was quieter, but his eyes seemed steadier. He fixed the garden gate, played with Lily in the yard, and when Thelma brought out lemonade, he smiled genuinely for the first time in days. "Thank you," he said softly, "for standing up for me, for believing in me." Thelma patted his hand. "You don't thank family for standing beside you," she said. "That's just what we do." As the sun set that evening, they sat together on the porch, the three of them watching the sky turn pink and gold. The air was peaceful again, and though Thelma knew life could always change in an instant, she felt a quiet certainty deep in her chest. Sometimes storms come to remind you how strong you are, and sometimes they pass just to show you the beauty of calm that follows. The soft sound of rain tapped against the windows one early morning as Thelma stirred awake. The house felt different now, quieter, emptier somehow. Jack had left 2 weeks earlier to turn himself in and face what he called unfinished business. The memory of his last night in the house still lingered like a song that wouldn't fade. He had sat at her kitchen table, his hands folded tightly together, his voice calm but heavy. "I can't keep running, Miss Thelma," he had said. "You gave me a chance to live right. I have to finish this or it'll always hang over us." Thelma had wanted to tell him not to go, but she saw the determination in his eyes, the kind that comes when a man decides he's ready to make peace with himself. So she had simply placed her hand over his and said, "Then go do what's right. Don't look back. We'll be here when you come home." Now, with the rain falling outside and Lily still asleep in the spare room, Thelma felt both pride and sorrow. The house seemed too big without Jack's quiet presence or the steady rhythm of his hands fixing things. But she filled her days with little things to keep the place warm. Cooking, cleaning, talking to Lily, writing letters she'd never send. Lily missed her father deeply, but Thelma did her best to keep her spirits up. Every night they said a prayer for him, asking that God keep him safe and bring him home soon. Life continued in its slow, gentle rhythm. The townspeople, once so full of judgment, began to soften when they saw Thelma and Lily walking hand in hand to church every Sunday. Some even stopped whispering. A few offered quiet smiles. One day, while Thelma was planting flowers in the yard, the mailman brought her a small letter. The handwriting was rough, the paper slightly wrinkled, but she recognized it instantly. It was from Jack. She sat down on the porch steps and opened it carefully. The words were simple, but each one felt heavy with meaning. "Miss Thelma, I'm doing all right. It's strange being back here, but I keep thinking about your house. The porch, the smell of your cooking, the way you prayed before every meal. That memory keeps me going. They said I might get out sooner than I thought. I've been working in the shop here, fixing engines. Feels good to use my hands again. Tell Lily I love her and to keep drawing those pictures she loves so much. You once told me love doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. I didn't understand that before, but I do now. Thank you for giving me a place to find peace. Tell the garden I'll be back to see it bloom." Jack Thelma read the letter twice, tears quietly gathering in her eyes. She folded it neatly and placed it in her Bible. When Lily came running out to ask who the letter was from, Thelma smiled through her tears and said softly, "From your daddy, sweetheart. He's doing just fine." The months passed, and every so often another letter would arrive, short, always full of hope. Jack wrote about learning patience, about helping others inside, about finding faith again. He never asked for pity. He just wrote like a man who had finally stopped fighting himself. Lily began drawing pictures for him, bright suns, smiling faces, the garden full of flowers. Thelma helped her mail them every month. One warm spring morning about a year later, Thelma was tending to her roses when she heard a car pull up outside. The sound was unfamiliar, but something about it made her heart beat faster. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped to the porch. The car door opened and out stepped Jack. For a moment Thelma just stared, hardly believing her eyes. He looked different, thinner maybe, but stronger somehow. The roughness was still there, but his eyes were calm, steady. Lily came running from the yard, screaming his name with joy. Jack dropped to his knees, catching her in his arms. He held her tightly, his eyes closed, whispering something she couldn't hear. When he finally stood, Thelma was there, smiling with tears in her eyes. "Welcome home," she said softly. He smiled back. "It's good to be home." That evening they sat on the porch again, just like old times. Jack had brought a small bag of belongings. Not much, but he didn't seem to care about things anymore. He told them about his time away, how he'd met men who wanted to change too, how he'd started leading a small prayer group inside. "It's funny," he said, looking out toward the sunset. "I used to think strength was about fighting. Now I think it's about forgiving yourself enough to start over." Thelma nodded. "That's the kind of strength that lasts." Lily curled up beside him, resting her head on his arm. "Can we stay here forever, Daddy?" she asked sleepily. Jack looked at Thelma, then back at his daughter. "If Miss Thelma will have us," he said softly. Thelma chuckled. "You two are family now. This house is as much yours as it is mine." And just like that, the rhythm returned. The days filled with laughter again, the sound of hammering as Jack fixed the fence, the sweet smell of biscuits baking in the oven, Lily running through the garden chasing butterflies. Neighbors who once avoided them now stopped by to chat. Some even asked Jack for help with their cars. Bit by bit he earned their trust, not with words but with actions. One Sunday the preacher at church spoke about redemption. He said, "Sometimes God puts people in your path not to test you, but to heal you." Thelma looked across the pew at Jack and Lily sitting together and she smiled. After the service, an older man from the congregation walked over and shook Jack's hand. "You did good work fixing my truck," he said. "Glad to see you around." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. That summer, Jack built a wooden swing under the oak tree in the yard. It became Lily's favorite place. She'd sit there for hours, reading or watching butterflies dance through the air. Sometimes Thelma would sit beside her and they'd talk about simple things, the weather, the flowers, what to cook for supper. Life wasn't perfect, but it was honest, peaceful. One evening, Jack sat with Thelma on the porch as the sky turned gold. He looked thoughtful, his voice quiet when he finally spoke. "You know," he said, "I spent a long time thinking I didn't deserve another chance. Then I met you, and you didn't ask who I used to be. You just saw who I was trying to become." Thelma smiled softly. "We all need someone to believe in us when we forget how." He nodded, his eyes shining. "I think that's what you did for me. You gave me back a piece of my soul." She reached over and patted his hand gently. "You gave it back to yourself, Jack. I just reminded you where to look." The next day, Jack and Lily planted a small patch of sunflowers near the fence. "They grow toward the light," Jack told her. "No matter how dark the night gets, they always find the sun again." Thelma stood watching from the porch, feeling her heart swell. It was a simple sight, but it meant everything. A symbol of new beginnings, of hope that had taken root right there in her own backyard. Time moved on. The garden bloomed brighter each season, filled with color and life. Thelma grew older, but her spirit stayed strong. She found joy in the small things, the laughter at her table, the smell of earth after rain, the way the sun touched the flowers in the morning. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, she'd sit alone on the porch and think back to that night long ago when a tired man and his frightened daughter had knocked on her door. She had no idea then how much they would change her life. They had come to her house needing shelter, but it turned out she had needed them too. Jack's life had been broken and rebuilt. Lily had grown surrounded by love, and Thelma had found something she thought she'd lost forever: family. One afternoon, as the three of them sat together drinking lemonade, Lily looked up and said, "Grandma Thelma, do you think people can find each other on purpose, or does God just make it happen?" Thelma smiled, her eyes soft with wisdom. "Sometimes both, child. Sometimes he lets two lost souls bump into each other just when they need it most." Jack laughed quietly. "Guess that's what happened to us." Thelma looked at them both, her heart full. "Yes," she said softly. "That's exactly what happened." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of flowers and freshly cut grass. In that moment, everything felt right, simple, peaceful, and full of life. Thelma leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. Because sometimes the biggest miracles don't come in grand ways. They come in the form of a knock on the door on a rainy night, and the courage to open it.